Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I am very pleased to have an interview with author Les Johnson, the author of several science fiction novels from Baen Books. Les, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
So, I wanted to start with some of your earlier works, and then work our way closer to some of the stuff you're doing right now. So, some of the first books for fiction you wrote with Travis Taylor, and these were Back to the Moon and Onto the Asteroid. And I wanted to know, how did your knowledge of NASA, because you've worked at NASA, and your a knowledge of space travel influenced the writing of this book?
Well, I'll hijack this just a little bit to tell the story of how this book got started,
Oh, yeah.
because it relates to your question. Travis and I have known each other for many years. We worked together. He supported me as a contractor, actually, early in my NASA career, and now his own career has taken off, and he's doing all kinds of great stuff. But he had just sold his first science fiction novel, and I was working on my second nonfiction book, and we were at a science fiction convention in Huntsville at a barbecue place, of course, right? And so we were having lunch together and talking about what a poor job in our perception that the public affairs folks at NASA at that time, which is 15 or 20 years ago now, I guess, kind of conveyed the risks of space travel. When you heard about the rocket getting ready to go, everything was nominal, right? All systems normal. Well, behind that all systems normal is an amazing thing that everything has to work right or people die, right? So at the time, we were launching people on the shuttle, and those space shuttle-made engines burn liquid hydrogen and oxygen, and basically you were pumping the fluids to the combustion chamber out of this big tank at a rate that would empty an Olympic swimming pool filled with liquid oxygen like every minute and a half, right? And had to go through these complex turbo pumps. You had to have no leaks. Everything had to be perfect or the astronauts died. And in the space, you make the slightest mistake and people die. And so we were just talking about how that the excitement of space exploration and the risk is really the call of the wild, like amplified by an order of magnitude. If you've read The Call of the Wild, at least you could breathe. Right.
Not in space.
Not in space. And so we were at the barbecue place just talking about it, and neither one of us are known for being quiet and reserved. And Tony Weisskopf, publisher of Baen, who had just published Travis's first science fiction novel and knew I wrote nonfiction, came over and said, "I was listening to what y'all were saying. Give me a book proposal." And so Travis and I came up with the plot for Back to the Moon, which evolved also into Onto the Asteroid. And it was informed by our understanding of primarily what is the reality of space travel over the next 25, 30 years from that time, and what are the challenges and the risks. And it's really risky, and we wanted that conveyed. So that book is our homage to The Call of the Wild.
Well, this brand of what will it take to do this exploration is my favorite brand of science fiction. And I was really excited when I found out that you had those types of books. And when you wrote those, Travis, he had one book out, and I think you'd had a nonfiction out at that point.
I did, one or two,
so,
yeah.
You'd had experience writing, but you were still fairly new to fiction.
I was.
And so were there any challenges with transitioning over from the more technical side of the nonfiction over to fiction?
Fiction's a lot harder to write.
Interesting. I'm the reverse. Nonfiction is much harder for me.
Oh, man, I had to really learn how to do this. I went out and read Stephen King's book on writing, read several books, Ben Bova's How to Write Science Fiction That Sells.
Of course, yeah.
And so I read all that and then started writing. But Travis and I had to plot it out. So we're plotters. So we'd meet at a Mexican place that we like in Huntsville, and that's where we plot our books. And we still plot there. And the challenge for me, I think, that Travis beat into my head was this thing called head jumping. And what I did in my first draft of the first fiction I had written and sent to Travis for him to critique was something I was not even aware that you're not supposed to do, and I was doing it in spades. And that would be in a single scene, you would jump from the perspective of one character to another, and it was really confusing. And once it was pointed out to me, Les, this is great, let's rewrite this whole scene, but do it from the perspective of this person, right? That was an awakening moment to me in the fundamentals of writing. And I had the grammar, I had the ability to do plots, Tony Daniel, who I don't know if he was working at Bain at that time, said, was talking about my plotting. He said, Les, you're good at plotting. That's one of your strengths when your books, you have well thought out plots. But I think this whole notion of the one person scene, perspective, point of view was probably my biggest challenge early in my career. It still is today, but it comes more naturally with practice.
Well, that's really interesting because that's something that you don't necessarily think about when you're reading a book, or even when you're writing. You're not focused on, okay, how does the POV switch, and when is that's something that apparently, obviously, that's a rule that we follow. But like when I'm reading a book, it's just, we're going to somewhere else. We're naturally going to switch POVs. So there's obviously now I'm also learning that there's things you have to think about that they don't necessarily teach that you have to make sure you include.
And when I'm writing now, if I have a POV change, say even in the same chapter, I'll have like a section break.
Yes,
so that it makes sure okay, this is something different, and
right.
I may have a different perspective or a different character looking at this.
Well, that's not your only collaboration with Travis Taylor. You also have one book released and one book that is upcoming in your Proxima series. You have Saving Proxima, and then the new book, Crisis at Proxima. Is that the right order?
That is, and there'll be a third book because it's a 3-book series, which if it's a Bain series and trilogy, it might end up being 4. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. And we're calling the series Orion's Arm.
Okay,
Orion's Arm is the name of the series. But the books primarily at this point, the first one, Earth and Proxima Centauri. The second book is primarily Proxima Centauri and another star, which you'll go and name because that's part of the reveal of the plot. But yeah, that's right. We're working on this series and have visions for where we're going to go with book 3 and maybe book 4.
Okay. And this series, it has some great Dave Seeley cover art, and
it's beautiful.
It's portraying this space station or ship. And my question is, when you are writing, do you have very clear visuals of like the ships like this, or are you more in the abstract? Because I know some authors, they'll think of ideas like that for abstract.
Well, for me, because in my day job I work in aerospace, right? I have preconceived notions that are intuitive to me that may not be intuitive to the reader about what an interstellar ship or a starship or any kind of spacecraft might look like and where things are. And so in my mind, I have to kind of visualize it, and then when I'm reading it, I have to try to put myself in the perspective of someone who doesn't have that implicit understanding. So I have to say, okay, if you're accelerating, where's the floor? If there's gravity, does that mean it's rotating, right? And so I have to think about that. So the answer is probably I don't have it visualized to the degree that the great artist Dave Seeley can visualize it. But after he did that for the first book, when I was writing with Travis book 2, I used his visualization.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so the book influenced the art, but the art definitely influenced the next book.
That is, so you also have an upcoming book set in Ben Bova, who you referenced earlier, his Grand Tour universe.
I do.
And of course, we were all very sad when Ben passed away a few years ago during the time of COVID. And he had been working on the Grand Tour, which I believe was 18 or 19 books?
It's a lot of books. You don't have to read all of them to understand the series. He's broken it up into segments, and this is the Outer Planets segment, which is Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto.
And so this was supposed to be one of the final books, if not the final book in this arc.
That's correct.
And so you've been tapped to complete this arc. And so is there anything you can say for Ben Bova fans, any hints or any ideas of where the story is going?
Well, I can tell you the book is finished. It's been accepted by the publisher. It's going to be out from Tor Books in 2025. Don't have the exact date to reveal. But I'm pretty excited. I hope that fans of Ben Bova will realize that I can never mimic Ben Bova. I'm not Ben. But I wanted to honor his style and his thinking and best I could based on the books I've read of Ben's and knowing Ben, and co-wrote a book with him in 2014. The challenge for this book was, though, he left no outline. He was a pantser, which I discovered when I wrote Rescue Mode with him, which was really hard for me because I'm a plotter. And we started writing that book, and he said, just start writing. Here are the characters. And I said, well, what do we want to have happen? Oh, you'll figure out something. I wasn't used to that. Well, for this book, the manuscript that I started with, it's supposed to be a 80 to 100,000 word book. It was maybe 12,000 words of a beginning.
Okay.
And so I had to pretty much start from that and try to visualize, okay, based on what he's done before, where was he trying to go? And I think people who like Ben, I hope that they appreciate it and don't want to throw rocks at me, right, for maybe not fulfilling it the way they imagined it would be, because I'm a big fan of Ben. I read his stuff in high school and college and all throughout my life, got to meet him, be with him at conventions, and I want to honor the man. And I hope that this book does that.
Well, I think that the audience will appreciate that you know him not just from being a fan, but also you having worked with him. Really, I think will help with go a long way of proving that you're the right person for this job. And knowing your writing, as I've read, and knowing his writing, I really do think it gels.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think it's good.
But fans of Bova might appreciate this too. Working in aerospace, I have people everywhere. This book is called Pluto, and I had some Pluto planetary scientists read it to make sure I got the science right of the planet. So I got some really good feedback on the latest findings we have from the New Horizons mission in terms of what Pluto is really like.
Do you have any jokes about dwarf planet versus regular planet in there?
No jokes. No. Sorry.
And also just thinking about, you were talking about him being a pantser and just being like, we'll figure it out as we go along. Well, it's like, that does kind of sound like the main character of the Mars series, who oftentimes he has like an idea of where he's going, but he just kind of goes by the seat of his pants.
Well, I have to tell you, Ben helped me write myself out of a few corners in rescue mode, because I remember one in very particular. I don't remember the exact scene, but I was totally stumped. I had taken the story somewhere and I couldn't figure out how to get out of it. But after about a 2-hour conversation with him, we figured it out, and his experience really, really helped.
So next question is leaning into the fan mode, being a fan of Ben Bova.
Okay.
Since you're completing the Grand Tour universe, or at least the final book in this part of the series, I wanted to know, of all those Grand Tour books, which one was your favorite, and also if you have like a non-Grand Tour book that you also enjoyed as well.
Of his?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd say my favorite was the Mars book.
Yes,
without
me
a
too.
doubt, Mars. I read that, I guess that was many years ago, 90s, I guess that book came out.
Yeah, it was
90s.
I think it was 90s.
Yeah, that was right before I met him for the first time. And so, of course, I've got the fanboy autograph from Ben in there, all that. So I would say Mars. And of the non-Grand Tour series, I loved his Kinsman series. Chet Kinsman and Space Guard, I've forgotten what it was called at the time, but it was back in the days of the Cold War. I was in high school, and I was reading about our first moon base and their exploits out there. And it wasn't juvenile fiction, but it wasn't the real deep stuff that he later wrote. It was just good fun. And I really enjoyed the Kinsman series,
So would you say that him and other science fiction authors who wrote this type of space exploration stuff is what perhaps influenced you to becoming working at NASA, or were you already interested well before that?
Well, science fiction did it.
Oh, good.
There was a combination of that and Neil Armstrong. I was 7 years old when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. I've revealed my age.
I was going to say, I'm doing the math now.
Yeah, I was born in 1962. Sounds like the Dark Ages. And my parents woke me up because it was late at night, and it was a little black and white television. I watched him on the moon. And shortly after that, my older sister let me stay up late and watch reruns of Star Trek. And then she bought me a science fiction book in a series called Perry Rhodan. If you haven't read it, it's pulp kind of stuff. And it was called Realm of the Triplanets. And I was hooked. And at that point, I knew I wanted to be a scientist, and I wanted to work for NASA. And I knew I had to go into physics, because that's the purest of the sciences. So 10-year-old me thought at the time. And all the people talking about it on TV had a German accent. All the people on Walt Disney and all this, because they were all the German rocket scientists. So I thought I'd have to learn German.
Did you end up learning anything?
I did not, but I married a woman who's fluent in German, so that's close.
Interesting. I love reading about like von Braun and all the German scientists.
Oh yeah, I got to meet some of them. I did not meet von Braun; he had passed by the time I came to Huntsville. But I met Konrad Dannenberg, and George von Tiesenhausen, and Werner Dahm, and heard stories about their flights of the V-2 rockets that were, of course, terrorizing London.
Yeah.
And all of the engineering, how they overcame engineering challenges of pointing, and it was really fascinating. And at one point, it was like, well, if you'd only known. And then I caught myself, and I thought, thank God you didn't know.
Right.
The war might have turned out differently, right?
Exactly.
They were on the wrong side of that war, but it was great to meet them. It really was.
My favorite joke regarding von Braun and those German scientists was that his autobiography, I believe, was titled "I Aim for the Stars." But I know Mort Saul, the comedian, used to say he needed to add on the line, "Although sometimes I hit London." But this whole discussion of being influenced by them works perfectly for my next question, which was the space right now. We are kind of seeing kind of a renaissance in going back.
Right.
We have missions, I believe the Artemis missions that are planning in 25 and 26 to first send unmanned missions and then eventually to send manned missions to the moon first. And then I know that private companies like SpaceX and Boeing are in a kind of a competition to try to send people to the moon or to Mars. And so my question with that is, do you think that the business is going to the science fiction exploration business is going to really boom because people will get interested in space travel again? Or do you think that people will really hyper focus on the real stuff that's happening, and so people won't care as much about the what ifs?
Well, first thing I want to say, though, is I have to comment on people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. They must have read Heinlein, and especially Elon Musk, because, the moon is a harsh mistress, and the man who sold the moon, I mean, oh my gosh, he could be a character in those books. I anticipate it'll be a mix. I think the early successes of the space exploration program and Apollo inspired a lot of science fiction, most notably things like Star Trek, etc., 2001: A Space Odyssey, all those kind of things. And we didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to take those next major steps. And I think science fiction put into people's heads unrealizable expectations of the near future about what space development and exploration might be. And that has been a profound disappointment to me. And as I've worked for the agency for NASA, I've learned it really is hard. It goes back to that first question you asked about, the why we wrote Back to the Moon. And I think as we're finally taking those commercial steps and there's more than just governmental interest, it is my sincere hope that optimism for the future that the first space race engendered and an explosive growth in interest in space and science and technology will happen again. I think this generation is too preoccupied with the negative. And I think the wonderful, bounteous things that we could do to help save and protect planet Earth and expand the human presence beyond Earth is taken in space. And so I'm hopeful that this will rekindle an interest in solving real-world problems, and that the people who are going out into space can do that, and in turn inspire people to read more science fiction, write more science fiction, and pick careers that will help make those futures a reality. I am an optimist, okay?
Yes, I can tell.
And that's what my hope is.
I really hope so too, and I hope that I generally believe that there's going to be like a ripple effect, and so if one good thing, like if we're able to get to the moon, we're able to put people on the moon again, it'll cause an optimism, and also business will be coming up with new ways, so the technology will be better, the technology will be cheaper, and that it'll ripple, and we'll be able to, the technology to get to Mars will become even easier, the technology to get to Pluto even maybe one day.
I'm ready, let's do it.
Yes.
Well, I think that's already happening, because the rise of companies like SpaceX in particular, they have not done what they've done as much through new technology, but they've applied a new business model to space. And as a consequence, the cost of launch has come down, which enables people like me, who primarily focus in my day job on payloads and things, it's now more affordable to do missions. And when launch costs are lower, other people can afford to do things. And so what it does is it bootstraps you into that future. And I think the advent of these new business models, they call it new space, has changed the way NASA does business, the way the European Space Agency does business, and all that. So I think it's going to bootstrap us there. I think it feeds on itself. And again, I have no doubt these folks read science fiction.
So I know that there's a lot of scientists in the business, especially in the past,
Right.
who turned into authors as well. And I was curious if there are an abundance of NASA people who are in the science fiction business today, and if you read their books, or if they read your books, or if you guys, connect about that type of stuff.
There are some. I work in my day job, I won't say frequently, but I cross paths a lot with Jeff Landis,
Yeah.
who is a Nebula Award-winning science fiction writer. I enjoy his stuff, and I cross paths with him. There are a few others from the Goddard Space Flight Center. You're putting me on the spot. Don't remember the name. But yeah, there are some, but I don't think there are as many as there used to be.
Yeah.
I think a lot of science fiction today that is not necessarily written from the scientist point of view. Maybe a lot of social science set in future scenarios, which is good stuff. I love a lot of it, but I'm kind of partial to the hard science fiction. I want to get on my starship and go to Proxima Centauri. That's what I want to do.
That's one of the things I love about Bain is there's so many Bain people who have either engineering like Joel Presby, or you with NASA, or you have I always call him speaker Robert Hampson, and you have so many people that have that scientific basis. And so they do have the non-scientific people as well, but Bain really has curated a great list of authors.
They have, and they're a lot of fun to get to know, and we consult with each other a lot.
That's good, yeah.
I mean, I've been called by many other Bain authors to answer technical questions. I reach out to them if it's outside of my field, and it's quite a network of experts, and it's really nice. Very helpful.
I wanted to take a few moments before we leave to talk about briefly some of your other books that we didn't get to mention.
Sure.
You have some standalones. You have Mission to Methany. I should say standalones. I meant books, original solo books that aren't other authors involved. They're just, you have Mission to Methany, and you have the SpaceTime War. And I know Mission to Methany, the basic pitch for that one is that there is this, I'm trying to think without spoiling, there is a message from out far away, and they realize that there's something with the moon of
Saturn. Yes,
that's right.
yeah, that's
Saturn
right.
Mission, or Methany.
Methany.
And
thank you for pronouncing it correctly too. A lot of people don't get Methany right. They give it the wrong pronunciation. I've even had people call it Mission to Methadone, which it is not.
Well,
that's up in the hills of East
there's-
Kentucky. There,
I think on the book cover it has the.
I had Bain do that, so people would say
so
it
you
right.
would
Yeah,
say it right.
yeah.
But they go out, and so that's the basic of that book. Can you also give the pitch for the SpaceTime War?
Yeah, the SpaceTime War, it was an idea that was not originally my own, actually. I was talking to Sarah Hoyt, another writer who I really enjoy. And she was kind of brainstorming this idea, and that book was originally going to be a collaboration between the two of us. And then finally decided, no, let's you go ahead and do that. Just tell people up front that was partly my idea. And I said, okay, Sarah, I'll do that. And so the notion of it is, and this is where... this is the unknowns of the universe come into play, right? Because we don't fully understand dark energy, dark matter, how that all interacts with space-time. And so I've always wanted to do a little bit of a time travel story, and so there's a bit of that in here that I hope is not much of a spoiler. It's not a major element of the story, but it enables a big part of the story. And that is that space and time are inextricably coupled. And a lot of people don't realize that before the Big Bang, there was no time. Time was created when space was created. So it makes no sense from a fundamental physics point of view to say what was there before the Big Bang, because the clocks that we operate on and time itself looks like it didn't exist until there was a Big Bang. And so the answer, there is no way to ask that question. Time didn't really exist before the Big Bang. And when you think about the universe and everything kind of interwoven, I won't say it's as simple as, H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, you pop back in time.
Right.
But it would be astonishing to me as a physicist if there weren't some things about how these are so interlocked that in the future we get a new physics that might allow some things that we currently think are impossible.
Okay.
And so that's the mind stretch I have in there. And it was my first foray into space opera.
Right, yeah. I could tell.
It's less techy.
First, just based off the cover, I instantly knew this one's a little bit different.
It's a little bit different. I had fun with that because I wasn't trying to do the hard science fiction. I wanted to have a grand sweeping story of a hero and a heroine who are basically fighting to save what they love and each other in an interstellar conflict of civilizations, and that's what the book is about, really, and it's about love lost, and the mechanism by which that all occurs is this space-time connection I've been mentioning. So.
You also have a recent nonfiction book, A Traveler's Guide to the Stars.
Correct.
Can you give us the brief rundown of what that book is about?
Sure. It's written for the non-technical expert, about interstellar travel and about the distances involved, the challenges of going between the stars, the energies involved, how hard that will be. And then, because I'm an optimist, I like to let people know that nature appears to be telling us, you can do this, you humans. Get clever with your engineering, because the physics says this is possible.
Yeah.
And so I try to put forth in the book, at a level that people who are not experts can understand, how we might actually take this journey to the nearest stars. And I also have a bit in the back of the book, because I'm a science fiction geek, about how different star drives in science fiction work, and which are based kind of on reality and not. For instance, Star Trek warp drive, if nature behaves a little differently than it really does, then it might just work, okay? But the space drive in Star Wars is just totally arm waving. Okay? So you don't have any hope in the Millennium Falcon working, but maybe the Enterprise one day. And all it's going to require is nature to show us that this little funky thing called negative mass exists, which we've never seen. Yeah. But if it does, the stars are ours.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I did not think it was that plausible. But
Plausible in the sense it requires something we've never seen and we don't know that is real, but the math works if it is.
Okay.
And so if we get a new understanding of the universe and we discover something that is like not antimatter but negative mass, then we've got the galaxy. Okay, so, but I have to give a plug here. This is the first of my books to be translated as much as it has. It's now available in 7 languages.
Okay.
And I have copies coming in from the publisher. The most recent one I got was the Italian version. I've gotten the Korean version. The Japanese version's on the way, the Chinese version, the Russian version, and I'm really looking forward to the Arabic edition. So I'm excited to see when that comes in. So yeah.
The U.S. edition. Who is the publisher?
Princeton University Press.
Okay.
It's out in hardcover, and they did a second printing, which is great.
That is
It's a great thing.
Yes,
it's in paperback now too. So.
Oh, it's in paperback.
Yeah.
I just know if you get a second hardcover printing, or even going from hardcover to paperback.
Well, for them, they don't usually do that. They usually just do the hardcover, and now they've done hardcover and a paper.
Well, if anytime you get a second printing, that's a good sign. So I'm very happy about that.
And I'm thrilled. All the covers are a little different too, which is kind of fun. All the international covers.
So if people want to find you online, they want to follow for new book announcements or anything you put up, is there something in particular they should follow?
Well, my website is Les Johnson Author, all one word, LesJohnsonAuthor.com. If you break it apart and you search for Les Johnson and author, you'll get some guy who's a fly fisherman. That is not me. He writes books on fly fishing. That's commercial if you like fly fishing, but if you want the science fiction, you go to LesJohnsonAuthor.com. I'm at Les Author on Instagram and also on Facebook at, I think it's Les Johnson Author, but I'd have to look that up to be sure. You can find it on Facebook if you search for me there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
Well, thanks for having me back. This is fun.
Absolutely. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.